focusing on the process on assessment-based national dialogue in Indonesia, with the complexity that Valerie referred to. So I, on purpose, to put these three nice goals in Papua, the eastern part of Indonesia, as one of the important pillars, how to make an access for children to have education, healthcare, and nutrition. So we try to make sure that the process in place is also make an impact to them. So there's a complexity in the process, but of course this make our work is more interesting. So before I go to the process, there's a key finding. I'm trying to actually just summarize all of them. One of there's a scattered social protection scheme and program in Indonesia. There's a limited benefit. There's a problem on the coverage, not only in the informal, which is we figure out there's no any scheme or social protection in the informal economic workers, but in the formal itself, there's still actually a limited numbers of the workers covered by the scheme, but also lack of the law enforcement. So Valerie also mentions in the overalls, in terms of the GDP, we try to also make the costings, and then the cost is actually less than 2%, as also confirmed by Marco from the SCAP. This is the figures. I think the first draft, maybe Sinta, who actually doing this, can also confirm, because as Valerie also mentioned, there's the process, and then within the process there's always the new scenario in place, and then it also contribute the changes of the GDP scenario, low scenario, and high scenario. But the costing actually lead to that is very limited number of the GDP, what do you call it, the expense, comparing with another country, which is there's a fiscal space. So that is the substance, and then for the process, what's more important than comparing the substance and the process? But again, that if you want to impact the three little girls in Papua, we have to really also to see the process. So I'm trying to actually make use of the 5 W and H in the journalist question, that how, when, where, and what. So this is like time frames to explain a little bit when the process is actually take place and when the directions will go to the end. So we working since I think in the past 2 years, and then we more visionaries, I think, because before the International Labour Conference issued or launched the recommendation to 202 on social protection, we already started on the how to implement or to assess the social protection program in Indonesia, which is we started with June and August. This is the first step that we actually in the term of the process, and the first process and the second one is more on actually the working within the context or the consultation work undertaken by the consultant. So we hire the consultant, which is Sinta, and with actually also helping from the regional office like Valerie. We actually finalize the desk reviews, make a costings, bilateral meeting. But of course, after the initial draft actually completed, we have to do real work, like making a consultative meeting, consultative public. So between September and March, there is a serious meeting that we actually undertake, not only in the national level, but also in the provincial level, because we have most decentralized countries, so we have to really what you call it, taken into account the feedback, input from the provincial level. So, but we have more than, I think, 34 provinces, and if you look at the sub-province, there's 400 more. So we have only selected that the province that representing the demographic issues, the economic levels, and also the income level, the GDP, to actually reflect the what they call it, the decentralized point of views. So in May and July, we have the final report, And then we plan to actually launch next November, next month. But initially we plan to have it in June. So this is kind of the process that we actually encounter. There are a lot more actors involved, and then it's actually lead to the postponement of the launching. So one of the strategy, I invited also the people from Bapenas to come, and then as Valerie mentioned that perhaps they can actually work for us in terms of the accelerating the process of the launching. And once the launching is take place, it's gonna be the hands-on training costing tools. I think kind of like this, but more specific on the country level, and that the Paramadina graduate school will take place. I think the fourth and the fifth step could be maybe a limitation that we will talk more further. So who actually people involved? So as Valerie mentioned that we try to actually as much as possible involve many relevant actors, relevant stakeholders. It could be government officials, and the government officials we include the planning agencies, Ministry of Manpower, social affairs, because most of the issues related with social assistance. But this is like really the country cross-cutting issues, so we have to include as much as possible all the ministry, and then they can give the feedback for us. And we made the Bapenas as a champion, so we expect that the Bapenas or the planning agencies can lead this process. But of course, since we are tripartite organization, we involve also employers, workers. But most important thing, if you look at the cross-cutting issues from health, children's working age, that is actually mandate of the ILO, but elderly and also the women on the issue on the gender, people with disability, is actually part of the another UN agency mandate. So luckily that in Indonesia cases, the ILO, that we have the sub-working group on social protection that I personally also chair this sub-working group. So we actually invited all the UN's relevant agency to provide feedback. So that's why if you look at the final report, there is any all reference to the HIV/AIDS, health issues, children. That's actually part of the result of accommodating all the inputs from another UN agencies. So we involve the UN Women, UNAIDS, UNICEF, and WHO. But also involving other civil society like academia, NGOs, not only in national level, but also in the regional level. So in the provincial level, we also do the same things in the national one. We're trying to engage the planning agencies because in the context of Indonesia, the Bapeda or planning agencies in the provincial level actually have a task in coordinating all the development effort and also the budgeting issues. So yes, we pick 3 provinces. It should be actually show the map, but it's disappear why. So there is a Maluku is representing the eastern part. NTT is more one of the poorest province in Indonesia, but also East Java is more actually mid-income level in terms of the GDP for the provincial level. So it's we pick on purpose that they're actually representing all the different stages of the income levels. And that's in doing so, we're trying to make also the advocacy in the national level, trying to align with the national policies, but also trying to make the social protection floor is mainstream in the Indonesian job pact, for instance, as a part of the pact signed by the tripartite, workers, employers, and the government. So they already actually reference the social protection. We made some bilateral meetings with Bapenas, with the planning agency, even the vice president office, to really actually underline the important thing of the social protection reform. And after the consultation meetings, we have the initial draft to be shared with others, and then also there is a validation workshop to validate what the result. And one of the good recommendations came out from the workshop is to have the piloting to some extent, like the single window service. I think you learn later on what is the single window service, instead of the many windows there, but only one window service. And of course, I think the most important things there is since the governance now, the planning agencies is on the driving seat. Now they actually lead the process. They have some kind of another technical meetings. They involve another line minister to provide the feedback. So that's why there is a scheduling in terms of the finalization of the work, the report itself. I think there is some lesson learned from what actually we shared earlier, that it's important to make relevancies with the government priorities and make our life easier. And then this would actually ensures the sustainability. For instance, like the government of Indonesia now is trying to actually extend the coverage of the social security to the informal. And then one of the recommendations, the single window service, is actually trying to address these issues, how to actually extend the social security to the informal workers. And then likely now we are also in the meantime to preparing the national social security system, which is adopting the universal coverage, but how to cover universally all the citizens. So this kind of the contribution to this exercise, I think, because we have to identify what the existing program and policy, what the gaps, and how to narrowing the gap, and also the involving all of them from the beginning. I remember that, if I recall, there's three representatives of the provincial government actually came to the capacity building organized by the regional office in Bangkok in 2010. So we invited people from targeted province, and then at the end of the workshop, they actually continue to make an advocacy. It is from the perspective of the island, but I think understanding the concept from the beginning, it could be actually contribute the process faster. I think I mentioned that the UN working group, the all the academia, including also the civil society, has to be involved. But also we need to actually identify the lead agency to buy in at the end, because if there is no become or the converting to the what they call it, the country strategy policy paper, it couldn't work. And I think it's also important that we did some make it the wider audience understand what the concepts, what the assessment. So we did some media briefings through the TV, radio interviews. This is one of the article that I quoted at the end of our validation workshops. It's part of the regional workshops conducted in mid-December last year. So the unified services as proposed by the validation workshop is actually get the wider audience to actually make further process from the government point of view. So yeah, I think there is some limitation, of course, like whether this SPF is part of the encourage the informal workers, for instance, because there is some allocation for a state budget who actually can afford to pay contribution, for instance, on the contributory-based social security scheme. But of course, we actually open for the participatory, more involved actors, but of course they are a little bit delay the process to the end, because we're trying to accommodate more feedback, and how to make it also the SPF exercise in line with the current development program. This is something I leave it to you, and I'm interested in to get your feedback. And this close my presentation. Thank you.